Hey there, what's happening? This is Eric Duncanson coming at you live from beautiful Marietta, Georgia. And I'm talking today about, actually I'm giving part 6 of my several part series on the Slight Edge Principle by Jeff Olson. And this is all about achieving success by focusing on the little things, the little decisions you make to do either the right thing or the wrong thing. And quite often we make decisions without really thinking about it. And over time, the impact of those decisions can be absolutely tremendous. So today I wanted to talk about just some small decisions that you might be making without really paying much attention to it. For example, this morning, I was trying to wake up, but I hit that snooze button. So I wanted to get that extra 10 minutes of sleep, right? Now, what did that extra 10 minutes do for me? It gave me maybe a little psychological boost, but not really that much rest in 10 minutes. But I'm thinking, what if I took that 10 minutes and applied it to working on my business? 10 minutes, one day, probably not very significant. But over a year, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, boy, you spread that out over the span of a year and it can make a tremendous difference in your business. So just something as simple as pushing the snooze button, 10 minutes or 3,600 minutes, right? Over a year, it can make a big difference. And so really the little things are so important to pay attention to. It's difficult to pay attention to the little things. That's why it's so important to have a daily method of operation, a daily plan that's written that you actually track and measure. Because so many of the things you plan to do, you forget about doing because you don't have a reference point. And if you're anything like me, when you get really focused on something, for example, when I'm writing a blog article, I'm very focused. I mean, there could be an ambulance, fire alarm, it doesn't matter. I'm focused on what I'm writing. And so I'm not thinking about anything else. And you can get so caught up into that individual thing that you're focusing on, you can forget about the other things that are also very important to work on. The other thing is there are things that can be urgent, but not important. So we tend to focus on the urgent things, regardless of whether they're important or not. But there may be things that are very important that are not urgent, that are not scheduled. And because they're not scheduled, you never get around to them. That's why it's so important to prioritize your schedule and make sure you're accountable. You review that schedule every day, several times a day. At the end of the day, you track how much you actually accomplished. And it's so important to use the honor system. Be honest with yourself. Again, it's those little things that make such a difference. Like the example of saving a penny and doubling that every day, right? It's those little actions that over time determine the difference between success and failure and what you're trying to accomplish. It's like the athlete that's preparing for the Olympics, and they get out there and they force themselves to get up, and it has nothing to do with how they feel emotionally. No, they've made a commitment to do it. So regardless of whether they want to do it or not, they're going to get up and they're going to train, they're going to practice. And that's part of being a professional. If you're a professional with your business, you're going to get up, you're going to do what you need to do, regardless of how you feel. Your emotion should not be a factor. You do it regardless, because the ultimate result is not going to depend on what your emotion is on any particular day. The ultimate result is going to be a tabulation of all of the individual positive things you did and all of the individual negative habits that you removed. And it's like a balance. It's balanced out over time. So, one other thing I wanted to point out is that unsuccessful people tend to blame others. Successful people empower themselves by being fully accountable for all of their actions. See, if you take full accountability for everything you do, that's a form of empowerment. That says I have the power to determine whether I'm successful or a failure. But if you have a tendency to blame other people, you're putting the power of your success or failure in somebody else's hands. And you definitely don't want to do that. You don't want to sap your power by saying if something goes wrong, I had no power to control that. You have the power over your success or failure because there's an infinite amount of solutions to every problem that you have. It's just that most people, when they have a problem, when things are not going their way, they tend to have a mental freeze. You know what I mean by mental freeze? A mental freeze is like when you drink a cold drink, like an icy, right? And then your brain freezes up. You have a brain freeze. You can't do anything. Your brain stops acting. Your mind stops thinking. And so when things are not going the way you want them to, a lot of times people go into that brain freeze mode and they start saying, why me? Why me? Why me? Well, why me is not going to get you to your solution. You need to be focused on solutions and not the problem. So definitely you need to keep the power and understand one more thing. Your past is there for a learning experience. That's one of the reasons why we're living this life, so we can learn. Your past should not be an anchor. Don't let your past create limitations for you. Your past is just there as a reference point. It's a reference point to build on from a positive perspective. So I hope you find value in the information I'm providing. If you find value in it and you like additional information, just type info in the comments below. Otherwise, this is Eric Duncanson saying I hope you're having a great day. If not, let's make it a great one.